welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Theory, a proud member of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Bauer. You can find me on Twitter at The Bauer Club. And I'm joined, as always, the man, the myth, the legend, Dan Lamagna. That is at FF Coach Dan on Twitter. What's going on, Dan?
Pumped for tonight's show. Wide receivers, used to play the position, love it. But currently I'm also excited, starting to coach flag football for my kid this weekend. So I'm going to be scouting 10 and 11-year-old wide receivers for Dynasty Theory in the year 2031. I'll get back to you guys.
Your son's going to say, Dad, listen about my yards per route run. And you're going to say, yeah, but did you watch the film? Did you watch I don't care about your yards per route run. Well, anyway, we're also joined by Mitch Sorensen. That is at DynoMC on Twitter. What's up, Mitch?
What's up, guys? I noticed that this show took probably 4 times the amount of research that the quarterback and running back one took combined. There's just so many wide receivers to go through, and they're so alike that, it's going to be really tough getting through these guys.
So the way I did this, and that's a really good point, they're so alike. I think there are a lot that fall in certain buckets, and not even tiers, but wide receivers that are just similar to each other, whether it's their playing style, their build, their physique. There's a lot of wide receivers in this class that if they hit, they will be an outlier just because of, their height or their weight or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of short guys in this wide receiver class. A lot.
We'll get into that, but I mean, it's slot wide receiver city in this year's draft.
There's a lot of short guys, a lot of old guys. I pretty much crossed all of them off my list. So I'm down to like 3 wide receivers that I'm looking to draft. All right, guys. I put on Twitter, I said, how long until we get into our first fight tonight? Because let's time it, because it could be early tonight.
I got the flags ready.
I know. But
I actually think we'll be okay for the first 5 guys. I think we'll get through that. But as soon as we get into that second, third tier, that's when it's going to start to get ugly.
All right, so the first group that we want to talk about, it's the first round wide receivers. And I don't necessarily mean first round in your rookie draft, first round in your super flex rookie draft, but players that have that potential first round NFL draft pedigree. Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Terrace Marshall, Rashad Bateman, Kadarius Toney. Those are all guys who have been linked to that first round draft capital, where we have guys like Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase. They're locked and loaded. And then you have guys like Bateman, Toney that have been getting thrown into the conversation as well. Who wants to start us off? Who wants to get the show on the road? Dan, the former wide receiver, hit us with some truth. Those 6 receivers, who are you, not so much who are you interested in, but maybe a player that you're higher on in the community, or somebody that, hey, there could be some red flags here.
I'm going between your show notes and my notes. I'm first glad that Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't in this first tier of wide receivers. I don't know. It might have been in your original draft there. I had the challenge flag ready. I'm just being a smart guy. You know that because we like busting each other. But
I've never busted your chops, Dan, ever.
Big asterisk there. But, when I'm at flag football this weekend and Mrs. Lamagna is like taking analytics down for John Bauer as I'm scouting, I'll be like, you were talking to John, weren't you? But no, I soaked up a lot of film this week, and I'm kind of segueing a little bit from your notes, and you could kind of chime in if I'm missing a guy of your first round tier here. Okay. So I have 5 guys bolded. If there was one guy that I would say is underrated that I like more than most, it's Kadarius Toney. I think he's an ankle breaker with good hands who could dominate out of the slot. And I bring him up first just because I think it's the most controversial one. Mitch is already salivating over there. I think I'm a little bit more, from what I'm reading, in the minority of the dynasty world. There seems to be a lot more Kadarius Toney haters out there. But man, scream game, kick return. He is my comparison to Javonte Williams of running backs. He's a converted player. He was a quarterback in high school. So that talent is raw and it is still developing. But man, you just can't teach speed and the gift that this young man has. And I think with some good coaching, maybe he's a little bit slow coming out of the gates in the NFL, but I think that talent's so raw and so extreme. I just love watching his film. He's the guy that, I'm not saying he's better than these other guys. I just love him, and I think he's a guy that I hope falls to me, and I could get some shares in Dynasty. My number one guy is probably everybody's number one.
Well, here, real quick, let's go back to Kadarius Toney, because like you said, he's probably the most intriguing and the most divisive across the board. Well, except when we get into Devontae Smith and his weight, that could be the only contender there in that regard. But Kadarius Toney, you're in a super flex rookie draft. Are you taking him over any of these other guys in this category right here?
I would consider taking him over Rashad Bateman, and I wouldn't take him over the other three. I think he could someday be as good or better than Jalen Waddle, but I would not take him over Chase Smith or Waddle. I would consider.
What about Terrace Marshall?
I am taking him over Terrace Marshall.
Terrace, don't let that N sneak in there. Terrace,
Marshall, and he's a good-looking LSU wide receiver there, Mr. Marshall. Okay, he knows how to get open and
receivers.
Find the football. He's an LSU receiver. I mean, the pedigree's great. I just coach me, man. I want Kadarius Toney, and it'll be interesting to see where these guys go on draft day. But yes, I would take him over Marshall, potentially Bateman, but not the other guys.
Look, if I'm looking for a wide receiver, and Toney is probably going to end up costing you between the 110 and the 202, 203 in a rookie draft. The problem is there's 10 more guys just like him in the draft that are going to fill the slot. And now, hold on, hear me out. So we're talking about slot wide receivers here, right? So we have Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is kind of like the really good slot wide receiver that we look at, right? He was third in the NFL in slot targets. Really good. Do you want it? And there was someone else tied with him. Do you know who was sixth and seventh, but they were tied?
Was one of them Danny Amendola?
He was actually one spot lower than them, but it's Russell Gage and who else? Keelan Cole was right underneath them. But so the reason why I bring them up is, like, how much are you paying for those guys in Superflex drafts? Are they the 12th, 13th, 14th round? And you're not having to give up an early 2 in order to get that. So are we saying he's going to immediately come in and be the 5th best slot wide receiver in the league? That's my worry about it.
That's a valid point, because if the name you brought up there, obviously Russell Gage, Keelan Cole, there's not much too much dynasty value there. But out of slot receivers, once you get through like Keenan Allen, players like that, Tyler Boyd, he's probably one of the more expensive ones.
Yes.
And like you said,
he's kind of the ceiling.
If I put out a poll on Twitter, or I ask league mates and I say, 204 or Tyler Boyd, there's probably going to be a split there.
Yeah, and then the other guy that I didn't mention was Greg Ward. Greg Ward's the other one. I mean, they're free in Superflex leagues, and they're the 6th most targeted guys out of the slot. And so when I'm looking at this, and I know we'll bring them up later, but guys like Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, there's other guys who are going to feel that exact same need for me, and I might miss out on maybe a target a game tops. And so that's the reason to why where Toney is going, there's just, I think, more dominant wide receivers that I could get.
And I think where he's going is a key thing to what you said, Mitch, because I'm not taking him at the back end of round 1. I'm not there with him. But when we get into the early part of round 2, now I'm liking him. And I think he could be a Tyler Boyd. Like, when you mentioned the Russell Gages and Danny Amendolas, I mean, this guy's a physical freak. I mean, he could do so much more than those guys will be able to do. They can do. He just needs to become a more polished football player. So I like his ceiling in the National Football League. Will he be a top 5 slot or right away, JB? I mean, I'm not putting him with Keenan Allen or Tyler Boyd right away. Again, his landing spot is going to be important in the short term, but in the long term, I just think his ability is very high. High ceiling. I love the potential.
Yeah.
So going through my notes, and this is where I start to get excited because the numbers start coming out. And Dan, just so you know, I have my sheet up. So I'm not looking at the screen. If you pull your red flag out, just wait, because I'm not gonna see it, just to let everybody know. But when I was going through my notes and pulling everything, it kind of turned into a very anti Kadarius Toney, an anti Jalen Waddle slugfest, if you will. So bear with me. Since 2003, that's always the number, 2003, 39 wide receivers were taken in the first round. One of them was 20 years old, Brandon Cooks. 14 were 21, 16 were 22, 8 were 23. when you look at the players that had multiple wide receiver 1 seasons, that 21-year-old threshold, 29% hit rate, 18.8% for 22, 12.5% for 23. So just something I want to throw out there, as a blanket statement over everything. But for Tony, the analytics community is not going to like him. And a big reason, hang on to your flag. I'm watching now, Dan. But a big reason is the fact that he was not a wide receiver to start. So you can tuck those flags away because I understand that. And this is the one player where you're going to have to rely more on the film aspect than I can't even concentrate right now because of the way Dan. What a fool. But a player that you're going to have to rely more on the film for than the analytics. But 7 first-round wide receivers were not an early declare. One of them had multiple wide receiver 1 seasons, and that right there does not bode well for Kadarius Toney. It doesn't bode well for Devontae Smith, but there are some other things about Devontae Smith's game that I quite like, and I've actually come around on him. While I had him a little bit higher compared to where I would have, just because of how the Dynasty community viewed him, I'm catching up there. And Devontae Smith, I think I'm getting to the point where maybe I should have been to start. So Dan can throw out the I told you so. Just so I don't keep rambling on with numbers, break it up a little bit. Mitch, Jalen Waddle is that player that I can't get on board with. And you told me earlier in a text message, you said, JB, you're wrong.
You are. I think you are. So I think Jalen Waddle, actually, his fit matters more than anybody else. So we know Jalen Waddle wins with speed. He is, no one, sorry, happens every time, but no one is going to be the next Tyreek Hill, right? But he is going to be a guy who could be in sort of that class but he has to be used in the same way that Kansas City uses Tyreek Hill. If you put him with a guy, I know he's not a starting quarterback right now, but one like Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock, those kind of guys, they just can't do what needs to happen, right? Like they can't get the ball to where it needs to go. He needs to be able to run 40 yards down the field, running out, and then run a 20-yard out the next time, right? So he has to be used all over. And if they're not using him that way, if they're just having him run, just doing the old what the Rams did with Sammy Watkins when he was there, it's just a waste. But if you could put him with a very excellent play caller, I actually think his ceiling is the highest in this class.
All right, well, now here's where a few more numbers are going to come out. So I had to break it up just a little bit. And Dan, you got back just in time. You had a little glitch there, and you're back to hear some more numbers. Nine first-round wide receivers under a 30% college dominator. Only one of them had a wide receiver 1 season. That was Percy Harvin. Again, who falls in that category? Jalen Waddle and Kadarius Toney. No first-round wide receiver has had fantasy relevance while not having a breakout age. Jalen Waddle. All right. Breakout age of 21 or older. These are the receivers. Ready? They were taken in the first round. Craig Davis. Craig Davis. Who is that? I think it's just some generic name thrown in there. Henry Ruggs, Kelvin Benjamin, Robert Meacham, Kevin White, Mike Clayton, Anthony Gonzalez. Mitch, how many top 12 wide receiver seasons does that crew have?
Look, I'm going to fight back on this, right? Because none of them are Jalen Waddle, right? That's my issue with it. Like, I understand the numbers, and I understand why this is saying his chance to do it is really low because none of these other guys can do it, right? But at what point with numbers do we look at the NFL is changing? We know the NFL game itself is changing compared to even what it was 5 years ago. Like wide receivers, they're playing faster. Go ahead, Dan. You can speak to it better than I can.
This is for you, Mitch. I want you to finish your thought. You mentioned the game is changing. 2 weeks in a row, JB mentioned since 2003. That is 21 years ago. I'd be a little bit more curious if you could
check your
shrink
21 years ago. What
or
year
18
is
years
it?
ago. 18 years ago. Sorry, my bad math. It's 2021 now. I was saying 21, but 18 years ago. We hear how the game's changing. Mitch, right back to you, man. I wanted to throw that out there.
No, that was the only thing that I was going to bring up is when those guys were coming out, like you speak to Kevin White, right? Kevin White was what?
Easy on Kevin. He went to where I work.
Right, but he was like 6'4", 220 something, right? Like he was a big dude. Like those guys just don't come out anymore because that's not what the NFL is looking for. And so that's kind of where I get a little pushback on the numbers is, are we willing to change it with how teams are willing to draft now? Because I could tell you 8 years ago, there is no chance in hell that Devonta Smith was going to be going in the top 5 picks. And there's a chance that it happens this year.
Listen, I completely agree with you that the game is changing. We've talked about that on so many different levels, whether it's the type of quarterback that has really been a fantasy asset, the more mobile quarterbacks, whether it's the way the NFL is drafting running backs and how they view them, or with wide receivers, the physical, just the body type of the wide receivers that have been doing well recently. Yes, it's changing, but when you start to get all these different metrics and you group them together and you create those thresholds, I don't, Jalen Waddle, whether or not you want to say the last 18 years, the last 18 months, he's going to be an outlier. And the point in going back further than just the last few years is to create that larger sample size. And Mitch, you told me, John, I hate whenever there's 5 different metrics lumped together. It's like, okay, a receiver that did this. So let me ask a question. And
yes,
I want to ask a question. If I say, Mitch, Dan, I'm going to give you a die and you roll it. And if your number comes up, you get $100. That sounds pretty good. 1 in 6 chance. But now I say, you know what? Scratch that. I'm going to give you a coin. And if you flip that 50-50 shot, you call heads or tails. Now I give you $100. That sounds even better. That is what analytics does when you start tying together all these metrics. It starts narrowing it down. If you really quick, let me just say, if you look at just draft capital alone, it has a hit rate there. If you look at breakout age alone, it has a hit rate there. College dominator. But when you start tying everything together, you get more pieces of the puzzle. And I'm not saying screw film. That's not what that is. But when you can put all of it together, it starts to give you better odds. And that's when you start flipping the coin over the die.
And I think it's good information. And we are piecing the puzzle together.
I throw out a perfect analogy and Dan says, we're going to move on.
And we know we are drafting these guys accordingly to risk. That's why we ranked them. But JB, there's so many more 4 wide receiver sets. We're seeing so many more of these wide receivers pan out. We're seeing these wide receivers develop and pan out and produce quicker. Like the game is just evolving where I think the percentages, the analytics, I think if we shrink this sample size down, it's got to be showing a little bit more of a hit rate than in years past. And I think with this first tier of guys, I think the odds of the majority of them hitting is good. Now, how much they hit, that's where I say we're putting the puzzle again. And I look forward to our final thoughts tonight, which we got a while to go before we get there. But, we have taken our study in so far. I'm feeling pretty good about where these rankings are coming together. But the NFL draft, that there's going to be more. I'm going to save it for the final thoughts.
But you said something, and it really resonated with me right there. You said, talking about hit rates. What is a hit for you when we talk about these wide receivers? Is it one wide receiver 12 season? A wide receiver 24 season? Because if I'm taking a wide receiver with a top 8-9 pick in a super flex rookie draft, they better be productive on a multi-year basis. And you're telling me you feel comfortable with Jalen Waddle being in that situation?
I mean, I'm looking Waddle at the back end of the first round for me. So if I get Waddle in the back end of the first round, that means my team is probably a contender. All right. So I'm a little less needing Waddle to be a superstar on my team versus if I'm picking in the top 6, 8. Now, again, looking at super flex, quarterbacks may or may not go a little bit heavier. That factors in. That pushes some of this talent back a little bit. But Waddle, for him to hit, he needs to be a productive NFL player that's going to be in my starting lineup flex for years to come. If I take him in the top 6, he's got to hit. And that's where Jamar Chase comes in. To me, he's the real deal. Even though Devonta Smith is my guy, I'm putting my heart aside here, and I'm saying, hey, Jamar Chase is a guy that has to hit. He needs to become a superstar. Devonta Smith might slide in some drafts. Jalen Waddle might slide a little bit. When I say slide, it's if it's a rookie draft, that might be late first round. If it's a startup draft, we've seen Devonta Smith go to a nice sweet spot in drafts, and I think he could be had at a value.
Maybe I was going to make a smart comment, but I'm going to refrain. I'm really maturing here in front of everybody's eyes. But Initially, we were going to do wide receivers and tight ends tonight. And I was like, guys, I don't think we can touch tight ends. We've gone through 2 wide receivers. We're 20 minutes in. So what I want to do.
No, I got to talk about one guy.
All right.
Yeah, let's talk about him real quick. Just a quick analysis. Go start us off, Mitch.
I want to talk about Terrace Marshall. And the reason is I think taking Jamar Chase out, because Jamar Chase is kind of like set alone wide receiver 1, right? Terrace Marshall to me is the one guy who could turn into an alpha in this class. I'm not looking for a guy who's really good at slot. I'm not looking for a guy who's a good X or a good Z. I want a guy who can do everything. Terrace Marshall is one of the only people in this class who, when Burrow was there, he played outside. He had 13 touchdowns in 12 games with Burrow. Then this year, they moved him all over the field and actually played him quite a bit in the slot because, no one could keep with Marshall's speed at that point. He's like 6'3", 200 pounds, runs I think it was just a 4.4 flat, if I remember right.
And that's bad down in LSU because they're all 4.3 guys.
Yeah, 4.39, right? And so just when you look at him, and the draft type is slowly catching up too. I definitely think he's going to go in the first. And as long as he doesn't get that horrible Baltimore Ravens landing spot, he's going to be the guy that I'm going to be drafting a lot more of than I think anybody else is. Because I really think that it's smart when you have this amount of guys compacted in. I want to be overweight on a player. I want to be DFS Dan. You have 20 lineups going into GPP. I don't want to have 20 different quarterbacks. I want to have 4 quarterbacks, and I want those 4 quarterbacks to be good. So that's what I want with my Terrace Marshall.
To add to that, when we look at this first group of receivers we have, and we each got guys we like more than others, as does everyone who's listening to this show. But so we'll make different arguments for Bateman, for Tony, for Marshall. If I need a quarterback or a running back in the first round, or Pitts, if it's a tight end premium, then I'm probably not getting, and we're not getting Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle. So if I still need a receiver, and maybe I have an early second round pick, I'm really hoping to get one of these 3 guys. To your point of Terrace Marshall, Mitch, if I can't get one of those other guys, I don't like Marshall as much of them, but I think he could hit. I'm going to draft him and then hoping he could outperform some of those guys. To JB, Mr. Analytics himself, some of these guys aren't going to hit, and I'm going to be really happy scoring with a Terrace Marshall.
All right, well, let's get through. So these first round wide receivers, Jamar Chase, can we all just agree he is our wide receiver 1 collectively?
Elite physical beast.
There's no hot take here. Okay, this is where it's going to get a little interesting. Devontae Smith. Mitch, is he your wide receiver 2?
No.
Dan?
100%.
I actually have slotted him and Bateman, they're my 2-3, but I would have them in the same tier. So, Mitch, is Terrace Marshall your wide receiver 2?
He is, but I don't have to take him there. That's the one thing. Is if I'm at the 108, I'm not drafting Terrace Marshall there. I will trade back to get him because I don't think anyone's going to be taking him there at the 108.
All right, so Mitch has Chase, Marshall. Hold on real quick. Who finish out those 6, Mitch?
Marshall, then we'll have Smith, Waddle, Bateman, and Tony.
All right, Dan.
So Chase, Smith, and with Smith, if there is a trend from last year, this year, I love the route runners. Like I love Jerry Jeudy last year. I love Devonta Smith as a route runner. I believe he can go inside or outside. I think he's tougher than his size. He's been durable at Alabama. He just runs like a deer, and I think he's a punt return touchdown machine. And I got to say, he did surpass the all-time records of the legend Amari Cooper at Alabama. Not single season, but all time. So that holds a place in my heart as well there. I think he's just a tough dude that loves football. We saw that in the championship game, and you just can't teach speed. Rashawn Bateman next, strong hands, good size. I love the body control and his concentration. I think he has instincts, and he could beat you in many ways. So I've been where I think a lot of the Dynasty community has been high on him before me at different times, kind of hyping him up as a sleeper guy. I'm kind of catching on to that. Tony, I talked about loving, and then Marshall.
The one player that I want to piggyback off of really quick that Mitch brought up, Terrace Marshall. So comp-wise, when you look at first-round draft capital, fewer than 4 years in college, so an early declare, 20-year-old breakout age, and at least a 30% college dominator. Again, like I did with running backs, I did worst-case scenario for an analytics comp, so nothing, what we're seeing film-wise. So worst-case scenario, a good well, this actually comes out to a higher end, and then really high end. So Charles Rogers, Calvin Ridley, Andre Johnson. Like there's some good company there. And when you look at the profiles, Terrace Marshall, he does have that opportunity to possibly have a ceiling right there with Jamar Chase. So my rankings, despite that glowing endorsement, I do have Terrace Marshall at 4. So it goes Chase, Bateman Smith, Terrace Marshall. We haven't talked about the next 2 guys yet, so I can't talk about them. Jalen Waddle, somebody else, and then Kadarius Toney. So,
I'd be wondering, John, too, like Alabama and LSU receivers, if you kind of just cluster them out, what the numbers show over time of their top draft picks. Are they in a league of their own, of kind of bucking some of those trends or not? I'd be curious.
Well, I mean, the recency bias here alone for, I think, Alabama, when you look at Ruggs and Judy and I still am a fan of Judy, but I think for Ruggs and Judy, so underwhelming, that's in the back of people's minds too. But then it's like, okay, well, all these players played together, so many mouths to feed, but the expectation was Judy and Ruggs were really going to come in and be fantasy relevant, especially when we saw all these other wide receivers come in early on. I think it would be interesting just to isolate those 2 schools.
Look, it's hard to come in and beat out Nelson Aguilar. That's a really hard thing to expect a rookie to do. So we'll just give him this year. And look, Brian Edwards had the exact same issue. So, Aguilar can hold a lot of people off the field.
Apparently. All right. So we could have done the whole episode. I always say this, but we could have done the whole episode just there on those first round wide receivers. But mid-tier options, there are a lot of intriguing guys here, a lot. And Mitch, you're like, I don't think I want any of them. Where I'm like, yeah, these guys, they kind of intrigue me. But, and I've said this on multiple different appearances in other podcasts. I've said it on Dynasty Theory. My 201 very well could be somebody else's 210 and vice versa. That is how wide of a range here in this second round we're going to see. And ADP is going to be, absurd this season, I think. And we say it every year, but I really do believe it this year. So mid-tier options. Let me scroll here for a second. Let me get my guys that I lumped together here. So these are guys with second or third round expected draft capital. Seth Williams, De'Ami Brown, Elijah Moore, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Amari Rogers, who I think could sneak maybe into the third. And I have to give a shout out to the guys over at NFL Rough Draft, Mike and Ray, because I've been picking their brain and annoying the crap out of them. Mitch, you're in that DM. I'm like, hey, Mike and Ray, what's your expectation here draft capital wise? And I think they want to say, leave me alone, but they always answer pretty quickly. But that group, Dan, is there anybody that really jumps out to you? Not necessarily the top dogs, but somebody that you might have your eye on come the second round of your rookie draft.
There's one.
One? Only one?
Not saying there's not guys I don't like, but when I kind of separated my receivers from your notes, JB, and just started ranking them as an overall class, we talked about who our top 6 was, I think it was there. And then the only other guy cluster there was Tylan Wallace. I just see him as a burner, an athletic cat that finds the ball, 6 foot 185 out of Oklahoma State and other schools.
Wait, he's in this group too.
Receivers.
He's in this group too. I have him there. And then I had Nico Collins there too. I think I might have put that just on my notes because Mike and Ray said he could sneak at the end of the third. Anyway, Dan, sorry.
All good, man. But yeah, Tylan Wallace at Oklahoma State, like I said, they produce some receivers as well over time. He's the one guy that I think stands out amongst this tier and has the potential to go up into that first tier. So I wouldn't mind him landing with me in the second round.
Mitch?
I actually like Wallace a lot. I would agree if I'm going to pick one out of this group. But one thing I was going to mention is we have 5 guys in this group and like another 8 in the next group, right? To me, they're so close to if we say Green Bay drafts one of them, I don't care what their name is in the second round. They draft a wide receiver. That wide receiver is going to jump up above everybody, no matter where the rest go. I mean, the rest can get premier landing spots, but these guys are so close that, I brought him up in the Discord chat and I said, Rondale Moore. If he goes there, he's already going to go in the 202, 203 range anyways, but that's going to just cement him in there. But if you bring up a guy like, Who do you just bring up? Nico Collins, right? Well, if Nico Collins goes there, what's going to happen? I mean, the exact same thing. And he'll all of a sudden move up to the early first. So I think there's a lot of these guys that are just so close that it's going to be draft capital dependent, and where they are drafted, that's going to really matter to me this year. I was listening to the Draft Network's podcast today, and they brought up a really good point with Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore is like extremely team dependent on where he goes. If they ask their slot wide receiver to run 40 yards down the field, to split the seam, he's not going to do that at 5'7". Like, you just can't ask him to. So Rondale Moore needs to go to one that's going to have him, get in spots middle of the field, use that speed to break away from everybody and get those yards. And so just some of these, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of in the same boat to where he's a slot wide receiver. I mean, that's just what he is. He could do well in the slot, but what's his ceiling? Jamison Crowder?
No, his ceiling. I'm going to tell you his ceiling here in a second. Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he's my guy. And I had the opportunity to go on.
One sec. Can I say something real quick?
Keyshawn Vaughn.
I love him because of his name. Like, his name raises him in the rankings for me.
Top-notch name, JB. Awesome name.
And because of that, he's my wide receiver 5. There's the analysis.
See? There we go.
Now, listen, so Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, I'm going to bore you with some numbers here, but it's not just Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it's Seth Williams, Brown, Elijah Moore, 27 wide receivers drafted in the second or third round, draft age of 21, breakout age, super young, 18 or 19. 6 of those 27 have had multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. 3 have not quite hit that. Chris Godwin, DK Metcalf, T. Higgins. So we could be talking about a 30 to 33% hit rate for multiple wide receiver 1 seasons. I'm not saying all of these guys are going to do it. Heck, maybe none of them do it. But analytically speaking, when you look at these guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's 3 players that I've pulled in and I've compared him to. And the group is Christian Kirk, which obviously isn't super sexy these days. And Dan, just so you know, even though Twitter makes it sound popular and that's the way you should do it, everybody shouldn't be comped to the superstar in their level. Just to get that out there.
I just thought Christian Kirk was too complimentary, was kind of where I was going, along with Jamison Crowder.
I kind of agree with that,
like,
to be honest.
Tajay Sharp might be his ceiling if we're lucky.
So the other players, and I'm gonna cruise through this negativity. Mitch and Dan are not going to dim my light tonight. Tyler Boyd and Robert Woods. Robert Woods, maybe it's that USC connection. I'll put it all together for you guys so you can see exactly where that's coming from. Kyle in the chat, just draft the right wide receivers and you hit 100% of the time, JB.
I agree. I like
that's
that.
It. That's an easy strategy. But some of the Tylen Wallace, Nico Collins, he's intriguing. He could be a big bodied, third round wide receiver, kind of in between. Talk about low range and high range. Traquan Smith and Kenny Golladay. The range of outcomes.
Can I ask? So this is like another issue that I have with the analytics part, right? Like Amon-Ra St. Brown, you just said he comps really well to Robert Woods and Tyler Boyd. To me, they play 2 completely different positions. I mean, they're both wide receivers, but they just play differently. And with the way the NFL is, and I hate having to bring this up again, but slot wide receivers do a certain thing, and Robert Woods does something completely different.
Well, and that's when you can start to incorporate slot percentage and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Slot percentage isn't incorporating, the other fancy schmancy numbers. Seth Williams, I think he's intriguing, but super low floor. Elijah Moore. So a lot of people had an issue, and again, it's not necessarily the body type. That was the pushback I got here. But I said, can we call Elijah Moore the 2021 KJ Hamler? And everybody, they thought it was a knock. It wasn't necessarily a knock.
Everyone loved KJ Hamler.
But I think the end result, well, not even end result, it's been 1 season. But what we saw, people were like, oh, that's so disrespectful to Elijah Moore. He's so much better, such a better prospect. He's probably going to land in that second round, very similar to the range that KJ Hamler went. And there are a lot of similarities, again, just from the numbers. And people in the chat, they're probably saying, JB, shut the hell up about numbers. People are I'm getting muted. Anytime I tweet number analytics is done.
I predict Amon-Ra St. Brown slides in the draft, and you're very disappointed, JB. That, to me, he falls in that good football player club. Like, He's a good football player, not a fantasy football player. I mean, I thought he was a good hand catcher. You know, he plays with some passion, but I don't see the juice that Elijah Moore has, the Rondell Moore has, like everybody else in this class.
All 3 feet of Rondell Moore.
Now, Rondell Moore, to your point of being 5'7" and short, there are concerns there. Like if you have a short quarterback that can't see him down the seam, I
him
think
and Kyler together would be great.
him and Kyler could present some problems there. You know, I think who was it here that said the Saints in our chat might be a good fit? You know, if a guy who can sling it around, and the Saints are very creative in how they use them. The only thing is, I think the Saints have some young receivers that they might kind of go with this year, but that'll be for a different episode. But so Elijah, I like, is like a Cole Beasley 2.10 in the slot there. I love his hands in route running. Rondell Moore, again, I do like Rondell as a freak athlete. I mean, he's squatting 600 plus pounds. This is a strong 5'7" Smurf, as Mitch said in our JB calling the timeout from the sidelines here.
The only thing separating potentially Elijah Moore and Cole Beasley is draft capital. But if you look at productivity and metrics, you know, at the collegiate level, they weren't far off. So
dude, I think that's a great thing. Like being comp to Cole Beasley's good.
I actually really like that one. The only thing that he's not going to really line up in comp and models is the draft capital.
Who else do we have in this group?
I don't know. You've been glitching for the last 5 minutes over there.
Doug
You live in the
Williams,
middle,
Elijah Moore.
Nowhere. All right. So
More slot.
yeah, a lot of slots.
Yeah, so Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, Amon St. Brown, Seth Williams. Is that the last one?
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, Seth Williams, to me, here's a big body wide receiver with upside. He's not a complete route runner, but I would gamble on him in a rookie draft. I'll be really interested to see where he goes. I have an Auburn connection here as far as just a diehard Auburn fan that goes to their spring practices and watches them all. He noticed some sideline tantrums when he's getting shut down. You know, is there any baggage there? And that's going to tie into my thoughts as well tonight. But I think the talent's there. I think he's not polished, but there's potential. But there are some concerns. So he's at the bottom of that tier for me.
All right, so there's about 55 wide receivers in this group.
They really are.
Mitch, give me the 3 they're the top of your list here.
So De'Ami Brown, he's a guy who's just an X wide receiver, and that's something that we don't see a lot of in this class. He's a guy who is like the perfect complementary wide receiver to Michael Gallup type, right? I mean, I think that's like the perfect way to look at him. And then if I had to guess, I'm not going to steal your guy, but the only other one I'm going to bring up, dude, I know he weighs 145 pounds, but it's Tutu Atwell. And the only reason why I bring him up, the NFL Network people love him. And if they love him and they bring him up on every single mock draft, that's because people in the NFL are telling them, we like this guy. And if he ends up getting really good draft capital, he weighs 150 pounds, you know, he'll end up sliding a lot in drafts just because dynasty players are smart enough to know that wide receiver is probably not going to last. But there's a reason why NFL teams love him. I don't know what it is, but that doesn't really matter if NFL teams do.
Dan made a comment, and I talked about it with running backs last week. The NFL draft is going to tell us a lot. It's going to be the last piece to the puzzle. If a team, and you said Amon-Ra St. Brown, you know, maybe he's not the player I think he is. Maybe the NFL views him differently. I will, and we should adjust accordingly. I'm not talking about landing spot, but draft capital. If for some reason the NFL says Amon-Ra, it's a cool name, but we're going to take you in the 4th round.
Yep.
That's going to really change things. I don't think he lands in the 4th. That's going to be my day 2, you know, during the live NFL draft show that we're doing. Day 2, and we sitting there, Amon-Ra. I might have to get a custom-made jersey or something.
JB, out of this class, there were 2 guys that I thought could potentially even be like Go Collins. He's in this group here, right?
Wait, say that again, because you were glitching just a bit.
Man, country internet tonight. Nico Collins, man, he's a guy that I think could be potentially bumped up a class. Really good size at 6'4", 215. I watch his film and I see the ability and the strong hands. I hear some of the people say like not blazing speed, but then I see he ran like a 4.4, 340. Like that's when I think 40 time over, man, like that's still a very quick NFL time. I think he's a very sneaky talent. De'Ami Brown is an intriguing player of North Carolina. He catches the ball in some really tight windows. His film was fun to watch for me. Mitch hit on Tutu, man. I just like saying his name. And I think a landing spot will be important. And I think what the NFL scouts like of him is he's got the speed and the quickness. And I think his football IQ's kind of through the chart there. You're right, Kyle, man. I apologize for that. I'll be calling the internet provider before the NFL draft. But and then the last guys that really intrigue me, man, Amari Rodgers. I'm starting to think he might be one of the better guys in the slot. Very, very good football player and a kickoff returner. JB disagrees, but I like Amari Rodgers, man. When I was watching him catch passes from Trevor Lawrence, like they had something special going there. And I know it's an elite quarterback, but I think there is something to it. And Anthony Schwartz, I'm going to go back to my Auburn. 4.26 speed, man. 4.26 speed. You better tackle him or he's housing it. And my Auburn context says the Tigers didn't use him enough. Kind of reminds me a little bit of McCole Hardman and his blazing speed at Georgia. Again, I think every time he touched the ball at Georgia, Hardman, man, he made plays. And that's Schwartz at Auburn there. So I think there's something special there where he's a sneaky guy that you can get at a value late.
Super young. He's a sprinter, like you said, blazing speed, lightning fast, college production, pretty blah. Like you said, maybe he should have been used a little bit more. And the expectation there is 3rd or 4th round draft capital for the NFL. I think Schwartz, I think you can get him in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts if you want to. And at that point, perfectly fine. Mitch and I, we took him in a startup where the rookies were included, and we got him at like, I have to go back and look, but it was fairly late. It was.
I hope it was late. Yeah.
It was. I would have taken him before Jalen Waddle, but no, that's a little stretch there. But so Anthony Schwartz, somebody that intrigues me a little bit as well. But Amari Rodgers, the under 25% college dominator, he's 5'9". All right. There's a concern there, and I don't want to be a heightist. You know, we've been talking to Jeff too much apparently, but that is a concern. So under 25% college dominator, 5'10" or less, 47 wide receivers fall in that category. Two have had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. And then only 4 of them had 2nd or 3rd round draft capital, which is the expectation for Rodgers. Gerald Jernigan, I think that's a made-up name that was thrown in the spreadsheet. Marquise Goodwin, Mecole Hardman, Eddie Royal, just a list of names that fall into that category. Again,
Eddie was pretty good. I remember Eddie.
I thought you were saying Gerald Jernigan.
No, Eddie Royal. Bears, he was good. Gave us some fantasy weeks.
I liked Eddie. I remember having him in a few redraft leagues, and there was one, I forget what it was. For some reason, I traded for him in a redraft league, and then I don't think he saw the field the rest of the season. It was a great move. It was a great move. All right, so out of that entire class, entire group, my highest ranked in that cluster: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, and then probably between Seth Williams and De'Ami Brown. Those are the 4 guys. Nico Collins, Tylan Wallace. Maybe Tylan Wallace, could get bumped up there. But the one guy that I don't like, Amari Rodgers. Sorry, Dan.
It's fair. He's not necessarily a my guy kind of person. Again, he's just a sneaky one that at real late, I would take a flyer on him depending on who is there.
So, Dan, just to reiterate, who's your top guy right here in this group for everybody listening?
That was Tylan Wallace. He was in that group, wasn't he?
Yeah. So is that your top guy?
Yes, sir.
So are we including all 13 players here? There's 13 names. Is that what we're talking about? I thought we were talking about the Amari Rodgers and Anthony Schwartz tier there.
Let me look at JB's list. I could be looking at the wrong one. He has so many lists here. My bad. He's not in this group. So out of this list here,
thank you, Dan.
My top guy would be Nico Collins.
All right, so you got Nico Collins, and did I have Tylan Wallace and Amari? So what I put together,
you combined a whole bunch and then just picked the best guys.
I like the Jerry Rice guy.
He's pretty good.
Something. All right, so the only guy that I'm scrapping out of all the people I just talked about, Amari Rodgers, but Tylan Wallace, Nico Collins, Elijah Moore, De'Ami Brown, Seth Williams, and then the legend, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Time will tell. Time will tell. Hey, now we're getting to the favorite part of the show. We're deep diving, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Late round wide receiver targets. I know everybody's talking about the top dogs. I know everybody's talking about those guys with first round draft capital. And it's a deep wide receiver class. But Mitch, like you said, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of outliers if they do hit. But digging deep, and I think both of you are bringing the same guy to the table.
We are. So I won't name the guy, but I will say this. As I was saying earlier, love slot wide receivers, right? We love slot wide receivers when we could get them really cheap because they're cheap points, and that's why we want them, because they're not Julio. We're not taking them in the 4th. We're taking these guys in the 14th round. And that's what this guy's going to do, and he's going to do it very, very well in the league.
I appreciate the setup. And I'm going to go back to our champions draft and answer the question you guys had about Anthony Schwartz, who you took 5 picks before this guy I'm about to name. So this is really cool here. In the 19th round, 1902, you guys took Anthony Schwartz, which I think that's a sweet spot, the way rookies were going in this draft. And I think Schwartz is in this class with Jalen Darden, who I'm about to mention there from the Green Machine. I love Jalen Darden. And like you said, Mitch, late value. I think this guy could be sneaky good up with these other slot receivers that we talked about tonight on the show. 5'9", 174, not a big guy out of North Texas. But holy cow, is he a football player? Like, he just knows how to score. He had some quotes.
Dan, you got to figure out the internet connection.
My apologies, guys. I don't know what's going on here tonight, man. Hopefully you hear me now. Because his quote, if you look up his highlight film on YouTube, he says, "I like making someone miss is like brushing my teeth. I have to do it every day." And then he mentioned slow feet don't eat. We say that in college coaching there. His stats are sick. He's playing for his dad who passed away. He is as shifty as they come. He is a playmaker with good hands. To me, he's a slot receiver. I love Jalen Darden.
So one thing that I will say,
I'm calling. Do you have Verizon, Comcast? Who do you have? Because I got to give him a call after the show. Mitch.
So, but the one thing I want to bring up with Darden is his acceleration, right? So when you watch someone like Cooper Kupp, he doesn't have that blazing speed that's going to run past everybody. But what he has is when you get him in a box, he'll beat anybody out of that box. And I really think Darden can do that same thing to where he actually has a lot of top end speed, but that acceleration and that quickness, that is going to be able to beat NFL defenders. And that's what you want. You want that, safety coming down into the box, covering him, and then he just blows by the safety because the safety can't change direction that fast. And that's what I think Darden can do better than a lot of these wide receivers that we brought up already.
I'm seeing a lot of names thrown in the chat, so I just want to do a little rundown here of why I scrapped certain guys as my late round wide receiver targets. And I think a lot of the reasons are going to be obvious, talking about age alone, but then some other metrics. Dwayne Eskridge and Tyler Vaughns, they're 24 years old. 47 wide receivers were drafted or an undrafted free agent at the age of 24. One has had a wide receiver 2 season or better, and that is Cooper Kupp. But he had 3rd round draft capital. None of those guys are expected to be in that 3rd round range. Dylan Stoner, Sage Surratt, Tamori Terry, I saw his name. Tariq Black, TJ Vasher, Trey Nix. They are 23 years old. Sorry, gentlemen. You are out. And I got to do Sage Surratt dirty like that. Today's his birthday. Today is his birthday, and I got to do him dirty.
Heartless.
You have to. 6 out of 224 wide receivers drafted at the age of 23 outside of the first 3 rounds had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. That's 2.7%. I use wide receiver 2 there because these are late round dart throws. We don't necessarily need them to be wide receiver 1. So trying to be a little generous. The number 4.4% hit rate when they're drafted at the age of 22 or less. So slightly improved there. Oh man, I'm getting all flustered over here. So my guy, where are we here? I'm scrolling. I have a few more guys to scrap. Hold on.
It's my guy so much. I'm not sure what his name is, but hold on.
No. I'm looking through. I have more guys to scrap. So 14 14 out of 462 wide receivers drafted 5th through 7th round or undrafted free agents, so late round dart throws, have had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. 2 out of 225 wide receivers, 2 averaged below 50 receiving yards per game and had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons in their career. That is Tyreek Hill and Doug Baldwin, the outliers of outliers. So because of that, and this is a name that somebody mentioned off the air, Amir Smith-Marzette, he can be scrapped. 4 out of 266 wide receivers did not have a breakout age of at least 20 years old. And then they had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. 10 out of 196 wide receivers had a breakout age of 18, 19, 20, and 5.1% of them had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. So here's what, then you start getting to college dumber, all that's good stuff. Mitch, you're glazed over there. But because of the 30% or below college dominator, only 2 out of 83 wide receivers drafted from the 5th to the 7th round or undrafted free agents had multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. That's 2.4%. So I'm going to scrap Daz Newsome. I'm going to scrap Stokes, and I'm going to scrap Coxie out of Memphis there. Kyle, you mentioned him in the chat. So for those reasons, like they say in Shark Tank, I am out. But now my guy, and you guys know how I am with names, but Simi Fehoko out of Stanford, right?
I love him.
Yep.
So you look at the college dominator, over 30%, breakout age, falls in that threshold, and he's over 5'10", so something we like to see. It actually brings the hit rate a little bit higher, about 3% to 9%. So still not great, but best case scenario, absolute best case scenario, a Robbie Anderson or Steve Johnson type career, multiple wide receiver 2 seasons. Worst case scenario, anybody else that never amounted to anything, but somebody that fantasy managers could be happy with, an Alan Lazard type production. All right. Man, I'm sweating over here after that rant.
I forgot everything you just said, although that was very impressive. Good, great homework there. But Simi, man, took him in the 23rd round of our Champions League there. He is a freak athlete, man. Didn't he finish like his career with that like 16 catch game or whatever? He was a machine. He'll be an interesting raw talent to watch, JB, and has your analytics to back it up. He does not belong in the JB scrapyard.
No, but again, that hit rate is minimal. This could be somebody that we never talk about again. But somebody as a late dart throw, maybe undrafted free agent after your rookie draft, you could look to pick up. Are my hopes and expectations high for him? No.
Oh, yeah.
But no. All right. Anybody else that you guys want to talk about? We ran through a lot of wide receivers here. A lot.
Terrace Marshall. That's all I got to say.
Terrace Marshall, he's somebody that certainly is rising up a lot of people's boards. And I do think, I've seen him, we've seen him mocked to Kansas City. If he goes to Kansas City,
oh Lord, yep.
Oh, holy moly. The one spot that I don't want anybody to go to Baltimore. And I know you can say, yeah, but
no, there's no but there. No.
I don't want to see anybody go to Baltimore. So if Rashad Bateman goes to Baltimore, and I've seen that, come out in a few mocks, I would not be thrilled whatsoever.
Agreed.
We learned from that. Hollywood Brown.
Dan loves Hollywood.
Like he's been demoted from love to like.
Dan, you're good now. We're at the end of the episode, and finally you're good.
Just in time for final thoughts.
All right, so nothing else on any wide receivers. We're good.
Oh, I set that up perfect.
Oh.
That was
final thoughts.
You throw him an alley-oop, Mitch, and he just watches the ball go right by him.
I tried.
All right, Mitch. Well, I ruined the alley-oop, but hit our listeners with a final thought after episode 113.
Just something that I kind of brought up a little bit is it goes against what other people say, but let's say you're in 5 to 10 dynasty leagues. I do think it's worth it to be overweight on players. There's like, you never want to be above 30% on something. You never want to be above 20% on a player. But I really think, and this goes back to DFS and knowing Dan wins a lot. Like there's 32 quarterbacks playing, probably 28 after the Sunday night games and stuff. But you don't have that teams with 28, with 28 quarterbacks in the lineup. You have 4 or 5 that you like, and you go overweight on those guys, because if they hit, then you hit and you win money. And I really think that's the case with these wide receivers this year, is find the guys you really like, draft them, and if they hit, you're great. And honestly, if they don't, a lot of these guys probably aren't going to hit anyways. And so you're probably going to be okay in the end.
Have we ever had a disagreement during a final thought? I don't know if we have.
No, I know you won't agree with this.
No, and it's nothing completely egregious, but the only thing is, let's say you have 3 of these receivers in the same tier. Maybe you split those receivers up, but you're saying no,
get the one.
All right. The way I would approach that is, if I have 3 players in the same tier, maybe spread that out. But again, you and I, if we wanted to go that route, we have the luxury because of how many leagues we're in. Right. If you're in 1 or 2 leagues, clearly you can't be doing that. All right, Dan, 113 episodes. What do you got for the listeners?
Final thought number 113 here. I think to all these points, so I'm getting ready. The wife and I were reading books last night, and she was reading a book. I actually have my laptop up with my rankings, and she takes a peek over and she's like, "Ooh, that's nice." She's like, "I like color coded," and then she's seeing like all the different asterisks and highlights, and the rookie rankings that we did right now. We've looked at highlight films, we've looked at analytics. We're looking at all the information we have to get us to this point. And I kind of get a kick, like people that were like blasting stuff on Twitter, like this guy is a superstar, whoever he is, like months ago, and really have no clue. I think for our listeners, we're giving you a lot of information. Take it, store it, and keep learning and keep adjusting as we go. Because JB, Mitch, and I are going to keep adjusting in every startup draft we do before and after the NFL draft and throughout the season, and keep going. Because I think what people kind of lose sight of a little bit, and there's a lot of great fantasy analysts that are grinding out there, but once the NFL draft comes, where those guys go, and we're going to have opinions of who went too high and too low, but they're merging their information of the film and the analytics with scouting reports, coaches' feedback, football IQ merged with ability. It's not just what we see on the game film, knowing the good and bad about the kids on and off the field. When I work at Lackawanna College and I get to spend some time with the football coaches in the office, there are NFL coaches calling their office about JUCO kids that just graduated from a 4-year university. Like, they are deep dive into the JUCOs, to the high school coaches, and learning everything they can about the kids and assessing risk. We don't know the risk right now. We don't know those Darius Geis situations that we talked about. So really keep in mind that when that NFL draft comes, they're giving us new information that we don't even know. When we're wondering why some of these guys are going high and low, it's because of all those things I just mentioned. I didn't even list everything, but that's just a little off-the-cuff final thought there. And then, that draft capital, how much are they investing in them? They are telling us their game plan going into the next year. So if you go back to our coaching episodes, merge that with our rookie episodes, free agent episodes, now we're seeing what they're investing and start predicting a little bit of what's ahead.
That was like a final novel.
I loved it.
Deep thought. That was like deep thoughts tonight, buddy.
I guess I can't talk about you being long-winded when I pretty much had a 5-minute run-on sentence going on about different numbers. But just to let everybody know, so we went through a lot of information tonight. Some of it, like that one group that we went over. I don't even know who's wide receiver one. I don't know. So next week, we are going to put everything together. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We'll talk a little bit about the tight ends to start. That Kyle Pitts guy, he's okay. So we're going to talk about tight ends to start next week. Then we're going to attempt in 1 hour to get through 2 rounds of a mock draft. But the way we talk, we'll probably get through 3 picks.
Yep.
So, and then the following week, we're going to be off on the 27th, but we are going to be doing the live draft show the 29th and 30th. And then we'll have a nice little graphic made up with our final rankings heading into the draft. And then I would love to see how things kind of get changed a little bit. Keeping 23-year-old running backs not taken in the first or second round out of there. So that's my final thought. All right. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Theory FF. Stay safe, be kind to each other, and have a fantastic night. Thanks, everybody.